To take his revenge, my brother, the emperor, married me off to the most wretched beggar in the land. "Aurora," he said, "you caused Livia to be wrongly married to another, making me lose my chance with her. Now I will make you taste the bitterness of being married to the wrong man." I didn't resist. I let him strip me of my title, demoting me to a commoner, and marry me off to a ruined temple. What he didn't know was that the place he considered the most wretched was, for me, the path to a lifetime of warmth. And in this life, I would never help him again. Chapter 1. I died. My brother, the emperor, killed me. He struck my swollen belly with a thick wooden club, causing me to tremble in agony and bleed to death. "Aurora, how does this despair taste?" Before I died, he forced my chin up, lifting me from the ground like a dead dog. "Did you know Livia had a miscarriage? If you hadn't framed her and forced her to marry another, how could she have suffered such misfortune?" I felt the warm liquid beneath me gushing out like a spring. I knew my child was gone, and in this state, I would not survive. He didn't want me to live either, but it didn't matter anymore. Revealing the plot of this world meant death, and bleeding out meant death. There was no escaping it. Blood trickled from the corner of my mouth. I swallowed it and let out a hoarse, ironic laugh. "Julian, don't you know? You're just the backup guy. Livia Thorne never loved you. You've been deluding yourself this whole time." That's right. My so-called imperial brother was nothing more than the devoted second male lead in a tragic romance novel. His role was to be a convenient rag, used when the female lead needed him and tossed aside when she didn't. But he believed I was the one who had schemed to have the woman he loved married off to another country. After all, I was the one who was supposed to have married him. After that, whenever Livia had the slightest friction with her husband, Julian's heart would ache beyond measure. And then he would come to torment me. This time, when he heard that his cherished love had been tricked into a miscarriage, he immediately sent men to seize me and, in the cruelest way possible, took my child from me. The warmth drained from my body, my very soul shivering from the cold. When I looked at him, not a trace of affection remained in my eyes. "Julian, if there is a next life, I will not help you again. I would no longer save you, this pathetic wretch doomed to misery out of some ridiculous notion of family bonds. Save the princess, His Majesty said she cannot die, she must live to marry that beggar." A harsh male voice cut through the haze. I blearily opened my eyes and saw Eunuch Warren, the emperor's chief eunuch, directing his men. A moment later, the pressure on my neck eased. I was saved, only to have my hands and feet bound before being thrown into my chambers. "Your Highness, you know the emperor's temper. He never goes back on his word. Even if you were to die, you would be forced into a posthumous marriage with that beggar. Why not just obediently await the wedding? After all, it's better to live miserably than die well, isn't it?" Having delivered his threat, Eunuch Warren left with his men. The vast bedchamber was empty, leaving me alone. I finally let out a breath of relief. With a few twists of my fingers, the ropes on my wrists fell away. I had actually learned this trick for untying knots from Ethan. Ethan was my beggar husband. Julian would never know that the man he considered the most wretched in the world was, in fact, a man of heavenly talent. When it came to choosing a husband, I really had to thank him. Once free, I quickly gathered all the useful items hidden in the corners of my chambers and tucked them into the hidden sleeves of my clothes. In my past life, I thought Julian might soften if I attempted suicide, but I learned through one bloody lesson after another that in his heart, Livia Thorne was worth more than anything. Now, reborn, I would not be so foolish again. After taking the important items, I retied the ropes on myself in a slipknot. As night fell, a group of people entered, dragged me from the palace, and shoved me into a small sedan chair. The chair swayed as it was carried out of the imperial palace. I knew where I was going. I had even been looking forward to it for a long time. I felt the chair dip, and Eunuch Warren's voice came from outside. "Your Highness, we have arrived. This servant will now return to report to His Majesty. Before I leave, allow me to offer one last piece of advice. You and His Majesty are siblings, born of the same mother. Once the Emperor's anger subsides, you will once again be the most honored princess in the land. So, for now, please bear with this hardship." His words sounded so pleasant. In my last life, I believed him, clinging to hope again and again until it curdled into despair. Only later did I realize that it was my brother who wouldn't let me die. He wanted to keep me alive, to torture me over and over whenever Livia felt wronged. Seeing no reaction from me, Eunuch Warren lost interest. But noting my lifeless demeanor, he said no more and left. With the outsiders gone, I instinctively started to untie the ropes on my hands. Just then, a scorching gaze fell upon me. My fingers paused. I put on a pitiful expression and called out softly to the man peering at me cautiously from the corner. "Husband, it hurts." Chapter 2. In my past life, I would never have dared to approach a man I had just met, especially not a daft simpleton known for flying into violent rages. He wasn't truly a simpleton, though. He had simply lost his memory, forgotten who he was, and didn't know how to survive. Anyone who bullied him would receive a brutal beating. Over time, this ruined temple became his territory, and he became known as the daft simpleton who goes berserk. At first, knowing his reputation, I was afraid he would hurt me. But I soon discovered that as long as I didn't take his food, he wouldn't attack anyone. In fact, he was incredibly easy to please. Show him a little kindness, and he would treat you as his entire world. You see, even a man without his memories knew gratitude. But Julian, the man who shared my blood, whom I had protected since childhood, repaid my kindness with cruelty. From then on, I cared for him even more deeply. I named him Ethan. I taught him the basics of survival. I taught him to read and to reason. Only then did I realize he wasn't a fool. He wasn't a fool at all. He could even be described as incredibly gifted. He never forgot anything I taught him and could even draw his own conclusions. When we went to the mountains to gather wild vegetables and mushrooms, he could hit a passing rabbit or pheasant with just a single stone. Combined with the other astonishing skills he occasionally displayed, I came to understand a profound truth. The man I married was no ordinary person. But for such a brilliant man to be reduced to a lowly beggar, I imagined the hardships he had endured might have been even greater than my own. Perhaps this is a common human failing. When you discover that someone else's life is in even more of a mess than yours, you start to feel that life isn't so dark after all. And so, like two wounded animals, we licked each other's wounds, healing one another under the torment of fate. Until our hearts stirred. Until we fell in love. "Husband?" Seeing him remain still, I called out softly again. His eyes trembled, and then, with his eyes turning red, he rushed toward me and pulled me into a tight embrace. "I've missed you so much." He held me, crying like a child. It was then I knew he had been reborn, too. I didn't ask him how this fool had fared after I died in our last life. Even without asking, I knew what kind of death this clingy man would have met. He must have starved to death, clutching the wild chicken he had caught in the mountains to nurse me back to health. The chicken is gone." He suddenly stopped crying, explaining to me between sorrowful hiccups. "I was holding it when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, the chicken was gone. I'm also so dirty, and I only slept for a moment. But I didn't dare go wash, and I didn't dare look for the chicken. I was afraid you would come back and not find me." I didn't explain to him that he had also been reborn. It was better this way. If he didn't know what I had gone through in the last life, he wouldn't be afraid. You won't leave again, will you?" His dark, moist eyes stared straight at me as he clutched my sleeve, as if guarding an ice sculpture that might melt away at any moment. My heart ached for him. Just as I was about to raise my hand, he noticed the ropes on my wrists. I don't know if it was my imagination, but the air suddenly felt colder. I was about to check if the fire had gone out when his fingers deftly undid the knot in a few swift movements. It's red." He sadly took my wrist and blew on it several times. As he did, he promised me angrily, "I will get revenge for you." Hearing his naive yet utterly sincere words warmed my heart. "My dear simpleton, you are the only one who truly cares for me. But it is because you are simple that you can say such things so easily." Getting revenge on a king is no simple matter. Although I knew his words were fantasy, I reached out, held him tight, and kissed his cheek as encouragement. He beamed, his eyes and brow filled with joy. Just as he was about to respond, a sound cut through the air. Flap, 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 a wild pheasant, seemingly from nowhere, flew into the temple. With one wing injured, it struggled to stay airborne, flying and dipping erratically. I was a little puzzled. Although this ruined temple was close to the foot of the mountain, it was a miracle that an injured pheasant could fly all the way here. As I was pondering this, Ethan had already picked up a stone and sent the pheasant to its final rest. A wave of happiness washed over me. It looked like we would have something to eat tonight. Oink, oink, my happiness was short-lived as another sound came from outside. Under the cover of night, I saw a wild boar barge into the ruined temple. I was speechless. Did I get a lucky streak after being reborn? Chapter 3. That night, Ethan and I worked late before going to sleep. We needed to get up early the next day to sell the pork for money and to contact my informant. I knew exactly where to set up the stall, thanks to the memories of my past life. Dressed in simple cloth garments and a wooden hairpin, no one recognized me. However, my appearance still drew stares from passers-by. This angered Ethan, who stood protectively in front of me, the sound of his cleaver chopping meat ringing out loudly. I shot him a helpless glance and could only sit on a wooden stool behind him, chin in hand, watching the people come and go. Perhaps because I had provided some entertainment for the capital's citizens, there was an unusual amount of gossip today. Did you hear? The emperor married the princess off to a beggar, and that very night, His Majesty got beaten up. I heard they say he was beaten so badly he couldn't get out of the imperial bed for 3 days. He even had to cancel the morning court session. Do you think it was even a person who beat him? Is there really someone in this world who can enter the imperial palace as if it were their own home? I doubt even the top-ranked assassins could do that. Who knows? Maybe it was the heavens punishing him. After all, to marry your own sister to a beggar is truly insane. The people's judgment was clear. I was so engrossed in their conversation that I almost forgot to check Ethan's expression. Thankfully, he didn't understand what they were saying. I breathed a sigh of relief. Once all the pork was sold, I immediately dragged Ethan on a shopping spree. After buying the necessities, we still had several dozen pieces of silver left. I wanted to exchange them for silver ingots, so I took him to the largest bank in the capital, the Grand Imperial Bank. "Manager, I'd like to exchange these for some silver ingots." As I took out the silver pieces, I also produced a token. The manager's eyes flickered. I knew he understood. I told Ethan to wait for me in the main hall. After he obediently nodded, I followed the manager into the back room. This subordinate greets the master. This was the first time the manager of the Grand Imperial Bank had met his owner. I had never shown my face before, partly to avoid making my brother suspicious of my intentions, and partly because I didn't think it was necessary. In truth, everything I did was to be able to help my brother when he inevitably faced a crisis. But now, all I wanted was to stab him in the back. After giving my instructions, I hurried back to find Ethan. I didn't dare to keep him waiting long now. But when I came out of the back room, the man who was supposed to be waiting obediently was gone. Ethan never wandered off. He always listened to me. For that very reason, my heart clenched in that moment. I asked a clerk in the hall and learned that a squad of Imperial guards had just arrived and taken Ethan away. I knew what Julian was doing. After being beaten and losing face, he naturally needed someone to vent his anger on. Since he couldn't find me, he would go after the person I cared about to control me. And the fact that he found us so quickly meant he must have had spies watching us. I made a mental note to be more cautious in the future. For now, finding Ethan was the most important thing. The path to the Imperial Palace was unobstructed. When I arrived, Julian was wrapped up like a mummy, lying on the Imperial bed, trying to teach Ethan how to hit people. To be precise, how to hit a woman. Unfortunately for him, Ethan was not cooperating and was being beaten by the Imperial guards. I almost laughed out of sheer anger. How could I have been so blind as to help a beast like this become emperor? "Julian, you dare touch him again?" I strode forward with a grim face, pushed aside the guards' wooden planks, and helped Ethan up from the floor. He didn't cry when he saw me. Instead, he had a foolishly happy grin on his face. I didn't listen to the bad man. He told me hitting women is something only beasts do. I'm a person, not a beast. I had to admit, a simpleton is a simpleton. Only he would dare to so bluntly insult the reigning emperor. Julian's face contorted with rage, and with a trembling finger, he was about to order his hounds to attack again. Just then, a spy-like figure burst in frantically. "Your Majesty, an urgent message from the nation of Valerius." Valerius was the country Livia had married into. Once again, I witnessed just how much Julian cared for her. He was so eager to see the news about her that he even forgot to dismiss everyone else. I tried to recall the events of my past life and the plot I had seen before I was reborn into this world, but I couldn't remember any major changes for the main characters at this time. I could only watch the expressions on Julian's face. First, it was shock, then elation, and finally, he muttered to himself, "Yar is coming back. She's coming back to marry me." I didn't know what had changed, but this turn of events was undoubtedly in my favor. If I knew who was pulling the strings behind all this, I would truly want to thank them. Thank them for bringing the tragic heroine back to wreak havoc on the devoted second male lead. Chapter 4. Good fortune lifts the spirits, and Julian was no longer taking his anger out on us. He eagerly shooed Ethan and me out of the palace, and immediately began making arrangements to welcome Livia. So, for a while, my husband and I enjoyed some peace and quiet. Taking advantage of his preoccupation, we rented a small courtyard house in the city. Merchants passed by our house every day, but they were actually spies from my various businesses delivering intelligence. In the past few days, I had also received a secret report about Valerius. Apparently, the former crown prince of Valerius, Ethan Valerius, who had been missing for some time, had been found. The first thing he did upon his return was to depose the current crown prince, Thuron Valerius Livia's husband, from his position. Normally in Valerius, the victor builds his glory on the blood of the vanquished. After all, Thuron had only risen to power by plotting against Ethan, but unexpectedly, despite their blood feud, Ethan didn't kill him. Instead, he imprisoned him. It was said that Livia was the reason he had a change of heart. It had to be said, Livia Thorne was desperately in love with the hot and cold Thuron. To save him, she agreed to Ethan's demands. Under the guise of returning to her home country to remarry, she was to come back and assassinate the king. I believed Livia was capable of it. After all, Julian valued her more than his own life. The envoy sent to escort her was not only the general of the state, who represented the dignity of our nation, Donkang, but also an honor guard befitting an empress. In my past life, these things might have made me feel bitter, and I might have even foolishly tried to advise against them. But not in this life. I couldn't wait for Julian to do even more insane things for her. Even if Julian didn't go completely mad, his recent actions were already enough to draw criticism. First, key ministers in the court began resigning one after another, and then the concubines in the harem started to give up. Julian was overwhelmed with these problems. I thought, through this, he should finally understand how difficult it is to hold onto the throne. However, I didn't care how he handled it. It was bound to be a mess anyway. All I wanted was to live my own quiet life. "Wife, you're awake." Perhaps it was the new house, but this man had been very excited lately. He was relentless at night, and I didn't know where he got so much energy. He would tire me out until I passed out, only to wake up late the next morning. The first thing I saw upon waking was always Ethan, propped up on his elbow, watching me without blinking. But I knew he had already heated the water and made breakfast, waiting for me to join him. With a husband like this, what more could I ask for? Under his expectant gaze, I gave him a good morning kiss before getting up to dress and wash. Usually, I was the one who did our hair, including his. But since moving to the new house, with more neighbors around, he had picked up a lot from the gossipy neighborhood aunties. He used to call me eyeing, but now it was always wife, wife, drawing out the word each time in a sweet, sticky, and cloying way. Besides the change in address, he was also particularly enthusiastic about combing my hair and drawing my eyebrows. He said this was a sign of mutual respect between husband and wife, a testament to how well we got along. After hair and breakfast, I would tidy up the house and receive intelligence, while he went out to work. He worked at the docks in the west of the city, loading and unloading sacks. Working was his idea, too. He probably heard some gossipy auntie say that it wasn't good for a man to be so clingy at home all day, so he went out and found a job himself. Now, every day when he came back, he would hand over all his earnings to me without keeping a cent, and then ask me for 1 or 2 copper coins for pocket money. He was quite pleased with himself. After about half a month of this, Livia Thorne finally returned. On the day she entered the capital, Julian personally went to greet her. The scene was as grand as welcoming a victorious general. To justify Livia's return, he even wrote a long-winded imperial edict, praising her lavishly. He called her a heroine who had sacrificed too much for the diplomatic relations between Dongkang and Valerius. At the same time, he took the opportunity to trample on my name, calling me a selfish villain who, fearing the hardships of a distant marriage, had schemed to have Livia take my place, causing her to suffer all sorts of humiliation and injustice in Valerius. I knew he was paving the way for Livia, using my reputation to do it. Ethan also heard Julian's malicious words and clenched his fists, ready to go and beat him up, but I stopped him. Compared to the suffering I endured in my past life, what were a few insults? The wicked will be punished by the wicked. Once Julian was truly with Livia, he would see his cherished love's true colors, and I would be waiting for the day he was betrayed by the one he loved. Julian's coronation of the Empress was incredibly extravagant, using half of the national treasury. Even Livia's father, a fourth-rank official in the Ministry of Rights, was promoted to a second-rank position as the Minister of Personnel, filling a vacancy left by one of the key ministers who had resigned. Of course, this wasn't the most talked-about thing. What shocked the world was that Julian, for Livia's sake, not only dismissed his entire harem, but also didn't spare the newly pregnant concubines. A bowl of abortifacient tea, and the entire harem was filled with resentment, all because Julian said he only wanted children born by Livia. Coincidentally, the day after the harem was cleared, Livia was diagnosed with a joyful pulse by the imperial physician. Julian was overjoyed and immediately decreed that if the child was a boy, he would be made the crown prince. From then on, the people of Dongkang knew that their emperor was madly in love with his empress. But some began to wonder how the empress, who had not conceived after several months in Valerius, became pregnant so soon after returning to her homeland and being with the emperor. It seemed she had conceived on their wedding night. Could it be that even such matters were affected by a change of environment? Whether it was the environment or not, I didn't know. I only knew that my dear brother had most likely become a cuckold. Chapter 5. Based on the date of Livia's miscarriage in my previous life, she would be about 3 months pregnant by now. The child was, of course, Thuron's. But in the palace, it was all too easy to bribe an imperial physician to fudge the timeline of a pregnancy. By taking the physician's family hostage and promising him wealth and glory, he was naturally forced to comply. With a royal heir on the way, Livia's status soared to an unprecedented height. At the slightest hint of discomfort, Julian would become frantic and neglect his state duties. He even summoned the best physicians from across the land simply because of a bout of morning sickness, all to make Livia's pregnancy more comfortable. As for the people in the south facing floods and the peasants in the north with no harvest due to drought, he simply tossed their petitions aside, turning a blind eye. Because of his incompetent rule, people in various regions, unable to survive, rose in rebellion. Yet Julian remained unconcerned, continuing to scour the world for rare treasures for Livia, just to win a smile from her. HMPH, it's just mindless doting. Anyone can do that. After coming back from listening to gossip outside, this man started getting competitive again. Wife, don't get pregnant just yet. I'll find someone to research how men can give birth. I'm not afraid of pain. I'll be the one to have the baby. This man really dared to dream. I laughed so hard that tears came to my eyes, holding onto his shoulders as I roared with laughter. You'll probably have to research that for a few thousand years. Not necessarily. He tilted his chin up, full of confidence. Maybe I'll run into a genius doctor who specializes in this. After all, my luck is pretty good. All right, you're blessed with good fortune. Whatever you wish for will come true. Speaking of which, ever since our rebirth, my husband's luck had been consistently good. Besides the pheasant and wild boar on the night we were married off to the ruined temple, he would often find ownerless silver ingots when we were out. When he went up the mountain to cut firewood, he would stumble upon and dig up high-quality wild ginseng. Whenever this happened, he would drag me to exchange it for silver, then run to the silversmith, the embroidery shop, and the cosmetics store, buying all sorts of things. This was a far cry from the ultimate simpleton of our past life, who only knew how to fill his stomach and cared for little else. This made me somewhat gratified. It seemed moving was the right decision. Interacting with people more really did have its benefits. You see, this man was getting smarter and more considerate. It's just that, cough, I didn't know where he was learning all these new tricks for the bedroom, but they were becoming more and more numerous and harder to handle. I kicked him in frustration, which only seemed to excite him more. The result was a world where I was the only one who suffered. After about half a month of this peaceful life, the capital began to grow restless. "Ethan, take a couple of days off work. Come with me outside the city." With the floods in the south and the drought in the north being ignored, the desperate people had two choices. Some joined the rebel armies, while others, clinging to a final shred of hope, made the arduous journey north to the imperial city to plead for help. They believed that local officials were covering for each other, preventing their suffering from reaching the emperor's ears, little knowing that the man on the throne regarded human life as worthless. He was the true culprit. Now, the first group of refugees had reached the city gates, where they were branded as rebellious migrants by the city guards and executed on the spot. Blood flowed like a river, dyeing the ground at the city gates red. Yet their dead eyes stared fixedly into the city, towards that magnificent, glittering place. Later, it was said that the undertakers found their gazes too terrifying and tried to close their eyes. But not a single one of their eyes could be closed. This eerie scene so frightened the undertakers that they abandoned the bodies, ran home, and doused themselves in black dog's blood. But the next day, they were dead anyway. On the day of their death, 4 large words were written in blood on the walls of their homes. "A life for a life." As for whose blood for whose life, only those who knew the truth would understand. When we arrived, the managers of my grain and clothing shops had already prepared everything. Some of the first group of refugees had managed to escape. Sensing that things were going wrong, they had fled into the nearby mountains before the soldiers noticed them. The city guards, partly out of laziness and partly, perhaps from a flicker of conscience, did not pursue them. Now, after days of starvation, they were on the verge of death and finally willing to meet with us. From their descriptions, I knew the disasters in the south and north were likely more severe than I had imagined. Julian could be an incompetent ruler for Livia, treating his people as worthless, but I could not. Making a silent resolution, I promised them. "I am Princess Aurora, granted this title by the late emperor. I will take responsibility for this matter." I gathered a group of experts in water management and construction, as well as doctors experienced in plague prevention, and set off with a host of supplies, heading against the tide of fleeing refugees. I knew the consequences of my actions, but I could not bear to see the Dongking Empire, built with my father's sweat and blood, destroyed by a lovesick king. The floods in the south and the drought in the north required a major water management project. Drawing on my knowledge from before I was reborn into this world, I provided a direction for the experts. When they finally, against all odds, drew up the blueprints, the real challenge began. We needed people. No, in fact, there were plenty of people. Using a work for relief program, I recruited all the nearby disaster victims, regardless of gender. Through everyone's combined efforts, the flood in the south and the drought in the north were finally resolved. The rebel armies vanished without a trace, and the refugees who had fled to various places returned to their hometowns to rebuild. My reputation spread far and wide as a result. The moment I returned to the capital, a squad of imperial guards knocked on my door. Chapter 6. I don't know if it was because the experience of being captured in my last life left too deep a scar on Ethan. Seeing the familiar golden-armored guards, his entire body tensed. He was like a cheetah, poised to strike. "What do you want? I won't let you take Aang away again. This time, I will protect her." The determination in his eyes reminded me of our past life. Back then, he had also stood in front of me like this, fighting these men. He fought until he was covered in wounds, unable to even crawl, and finally had to watch as I was taken away. At times like that, I would think, how could I be so useless? Allowing myself to be bullied without even the ability to resist. But this life was different. I had the strength to fight back. "Husband, don't panic." I took Ethan's hand, calming his anxious heart. "They won't dare to touch me." Perhaps my words sounded ridiculous to them, because they actually sneered out loud without any restraint. "Do you think you're still the noble and unparalleled princess? Don't forget, you've been demoted to a commoner by His Majesty and married off to a beggar, haha." This action undoubtedly reignited Ethan's anger. "You bunch of snobbish slaves, you're only fit to be someone else's dogs." After scolding them, he looked at me, his dark eyes shining. As if making a promise. He stripped you of your princess title, so I will depose him and make you the empress. Ha ha ha, so the former princess not only married a beggar, but he's a fool too. Tusk, he really dares to say anything. But it's not surprising. I heard the princess has peculiar tastes and enjoys the company of lowly commoners. Otherwise, she wouldn't have so easily taken a foolish and wretched beggar as her husband. Captain, don't you understand women? Throw them in bed and train them well, and even the noblest woman will worship you. What a pity. If we had known it was this easy, on the night the princess left the palace, we should have. Splat, several streams of blood erupted from the neck of that golden-armored guard. It was Ethan. He had snatched a sword from one of them and killed the men who had just insulted me. The scene descended into chaos. Seeing more and more guards swarming towards Ethan, I took out the token my father had once given me. This token was equivalent to the late emperor's presence. The moment I produced the token, a strange glint appeared in the eyes of the guard captain. How dare you, forging a royal token by His Majesty's order, arrest these traitors? So this was where Julian was waiting for me. It seemed he had heard about my actions in the south and north, and had come to investigate the token given to me by our father. So, he was still concerned about this token that could challenge his supreme authority. Take all these commoners away. After the guards seized my token, they moved to capture Ethan. I spoke in a cold voice. The one you want is me. I will go with you. Let my husband go. Wife, are you going to leave me again? Tears instantly welled up in Ethan's eyes, like a small, abandoned animal. The sight broke my heart. The memory of him waiting for me in the ruined temple after my death in our past life, waiting until he died, sent a sharp pain through my chest. All right, I won't leave you this time. I took Ethan's hand, and under the watchful eyes of all our neighbors, I stepped into the imperial palace once again. I thought I was going to see Julian's sinister and vicious face again. But to my surprise, the golden-armored guards led me to the rear palace. I breathed a sigh of relief, but I couldn't help but sneer. So the one who had truly summoned me was not Julian, but Livia Thorne. She was indeed favored beyond measure, daring to issue a false imperial decree. Chapter 7. The path through the rear palace was long, so long that I passed the Empress's palace and still hadn't reached my destination. It was only when the golden-armored guards led me into a palace that was achingly familiar that I understood. Your Empress is truly something else. I couldn't help but laugh. Did she really think that by stealing the marriage I didn't want and occupying the residence I once lived in, she had won at life? No wonder Thuron Valerius had called her unfit for the big stage. And she thought he was insulting her. How laughable. If Livia had learned anything, it was the darker, more insidious tactics of the harem, taught to her by Thuron. She knew how deep my feelings for Julian were, so she chose this method to flaunt her position, to make me jealous, to make me understand that in Julian's eyes, even the strongest bonds of blood were nothing compared to a single smile from Livia Thorne. After all, before my dear brother ascended the throne, I was the most noble woman in the land. Princess Aurora Sterling, personally ennobled by the late emperor. Back then, she, the daughter of a minor fifth-rank official, could only look up to me with envy. Initially, she tried to cling to Julian like a vine to a great tree, creating all sorts of chance encounters, all of which I thwarted. For that, she harbored a deep grudge against me. Taking advantage of my absence from the capital on my father's orders, she succeeded in making Julian fall for her at first sight. At that time, Julian had not yet been named Crown Prince by our father. Even if she convinced Julian to plead her case before the emperor, the best she could hope for was the title of an imperial prince's consort. But for her, that was already a great honor. Until she discovered that the only reason our father favored Julian was because of me. Julian was not as sharp and capable as the rumors suggested. And at that time, I was also troubled by matters concerning Valerius. As a child, my prodigious talent had caught the eye of the king of Valerius, who arranged for me to marry the then crown prince, Ethan Valerius. But who would have known that Ethan would suddenly disappear from the battlefield on the border? The king of Valerius searched the world for him to no avail and had no choice but to name another prince, Thuron Valerius, as the new crown prince, and send him to Donkang to form a marriage alliance with me. A prince was hardly as powerful as a crown prince, and besides, Valerius had been growing stronger in recent years, while Dongkeng seemed to be in decline, growing weaker by the day. Livia Thorne then set her sights on Thuron. Using a banquet I was hosting as an opportunity, she secretly drugged Thuron's wine. When they were alone, her original plan was to create a scandalous scene, not to get involved herself. But she didn't expect to be so captivated by Thuron's dashing looks, so enthralled by his domineering masculinity, that she fell for him at first sight. From then on, she fell deeply in love with the man who both loved and loathed her. If she had simply gone to Valerius as a substitute bride to be Thuron's crown princess, I might have respected her more. But to make sure I suffered, she went to Julian and spun a tale of my supposed misdeeds. She claimed that the entire situation was a scheme I had orchestrated, that I didn't want to go through with the marriage alliance with Valerius, and had therefore devised a plan to have her take my place. She even put on a show of a deeply emotional and reluctant farewell, making Julian, that fool, unable to forget her. But I only learned of these things after Julian ascended the throne, learned that the brother I had supported for half my life had long since come to hate me. He had hidden his true feelings for the sake of his love, continuing to play the part of a devoted sibling. But once his wings were fully grown, he revealed his true colors. So if I were to say who I hated most in this world, aside from Julian, it would be Livia Thorne. And now that Livia was in power, held in the palm of Julian's hand, the thing she wanted most was, naturally, to torment me. Ethan and I waited outside the hall for a long time before she slowly emerged from the inner chamber, supported by her attendants. "Sister Aurora, I've kept you waiting. Ever since I became pregnant, I've been so tired. I can sleep for ages. Please don't take it to heart." I forced a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I wouldn't dare. An old matron by her side seized the opportunity to make an issue of my attitude. She berated me imperiously. How dare a mere commoner be so rude in Her Majesty's presence? They were about to step forward to teach me some manners when my Ethan shoved the brutish old servants, who had been throwing their weight around for half a lifetime, far away. "What lowly slaves dare to touch my wife?" His voice was neither loud nor soft, but carried a hint of coldness and a faint trace of authority. I was a little surprised to hear it. I had to admit, he sounded quite intimidating when he spoke like that. So intimidating that Livia Thorne, who had just been feigning indifference towards him, suddenly snapped her head in his direction. Chapter 8. I don't know who Ethan resembled, but upon seeing his face, Livia's expression changed drastically. She was so frightened she could barely stand, nearly collapsing to the ground. You are." Her voice trembled so violently it was as if she had seen a ghost. The matrons, who had been about to chastise me, all rushed to her side, supporting her and fussing over her, terrified that something might happen to the bastard in her womb. With the threat of the brutish servants gone, Ethan relaxed his intimidating demeanor, though his expression remained icy. "I am Aang's husband." Hearing this, Livia seemed to regain some composure. She was helped into a soft chair by the matrons, but her gaze kept darting towards Ethan. Cautious, hesitant, her expression shifted constantly. Ethan, however, paid her no mind, letting her scrutinize him as he strode over to a cushioned chair, which he unceremoniously picked up and brought over to me. "Wife, have a seat." His eyes shone brightly, like a big wolf wagging its tail, seeking praise. I couldn't help but smile, patting his head as a reward, and sat down. When I looked up again, I noticed that Livia's color had returned to her face. "So this is your foolish and wretched beggar husband." She wasn't afraid anymore, it seemed, and even had the spare energy to mock me. I slowly reached into my sleeve and pulled out a book on the common knowledge of pregnancy. "Her Majesty is indeed greatly favored, but do not forget that there are no secrets that can be kept forever. This commoner has specially brought a book on the symptoms of pregnancy, and I hope Her Majesty will accept it." As soon as I said this, her face changed. The next moment, she clutched her stomach and pointed at me, her eyes filled with murderous intent. "Guards, someone is trying to harm the royal heir. Gag them, drag them out, and beat them to death with clubs," I sneered, and the aura of a long-time superior instantly emanated from me. "Livia Thorne, you dare to pass off Thuron Valerius's bastard as the bloodline of the Dongkeng royal family." I took out the token given to me by my father and held it high. Meeting Livia's astonished gaze, I smiled. Take a good look. Is the token your lackeys stole real or fake? And then look at this one, a token bestowed by the late emperor. Do you really dare to seize it again? With a thud, everyone in the palace knelt, including Livia. No matter how favored she was, she could not be disrespectful in the presence of the late emperor's authority. Moreover, with her life in my hands, she no longer dared to kill me. But this scene didn't last long before someone came rushing in, disregarding even the emperor's decorum. Aurora Sterling, you dare to bully my Livia? I'll have you killed. He arrived right on time, but it was understandable. After I had repeatedly humiliated Livia, someone must have secretly gone to inform him. Now, he rushed in and saw Livia clutching her stomach. Disregarding his status and etiquette, he pulled her into his arms. Livia, are you all right? Julian, my stomach hurts so much. Livia leaned weakly against him, making his heart ache. He summoned the entire Imperial Medical Academy while ordering his men to seize Ethan and me. Behead these commoners. What great authority, Your Majesty, a group of high-ranking ministers in their official robes, along with the long reclusive Lord Regent Alistair and the head of the Imperial clan, filed in. The Lord Regent was in charge of all matters concerning the royal family, and even Julian dared not act rashly in his presence. Seeing them arrive in such a grand fashion, Julian's face immediately darkened. Lord Regent, what is the meaning of this? The Lord Regent snorted coldly, took out a sealed letter with a dragon-crested wax seal from his sleeve, and presented it to Julian. Your Majesty, please take a look. Chapter 9. The dragon-crested seal was a special wax stamp used by the spies of the Dongkang royal family to seal intelligence gathered from other nations. The fact that this letter was delivered to the long reclusive Lord Regent's residence first, rather than to Julian, was thought-provoking. But I soon knew the answer. Absurd, after reading the contents, Julian tore the letter to shreds with a ferocious expression. It's all lies. I don't believe the Empress would harm me. But when the imperial physician arrived, and in front of everyone, placed his fingers on Julian's pulse, his grave expression made Julian's face change. Your Majesty, you have been poisoned. This time, it was Julian who couldn't sit still. What poison? Is there an antidote? Your Majesty, it is a secret poison of the Valyrian royal family, withered bone. The victim dies within 3 months of ingestion. It has been over a month now, and Your Majesty must already be feeling a dull ache and weakness throughout your body. As for the antidote, only the reigning Emperor of Valyrius knows the formula. Forgive this servant for being powerless to help. In addition, the physician glanced at Julian, hesitating. Julian was already furious. Speak, the physician gritted his teeth, quickly took a few steps back to a safe distance, and said with his head bowed, Your Majesty has also ingested a sterility potion. Bang Julian slammed his hand on the nearby sandalwood table, drawing blood. He staggered over to Livia Thorne, his hands trembling as he shook her. Livia, tell me this isn't true. You didn't harm me. You love me, right? How could you harm me? You are carrying my child. How could you be so cruel as to leave our child without a father? Fool, it's obviously because the child in her belly isn't yours. My simple and sweet husband apparently couldn't keep a secret and blurted out the truth in front of everyone. Instantly, all eyes turned to him. What? Am I wrong? Ethan pointed to one of the physicians hiding among the others and tilted his head innocently. The other day, when I was delivering ice to the madam at the brothel, I saw him kneeling on the ground promising this ugly woman that he wouldn't tell anyone about how they tricked the big simpleton emperor. I had to admit, my husband was a petty man. Julian had called him a simpleton, so he called Julian a big simpleton. He never let himself be outdone. Upon hearing this truth, Julian collapsed to the ground. No, this isn't true. I loved you so much. I did so much for you. How could you harm me? Who could imagine? The ruler of a nation had offered his heart to a woman, only to have it shattered by her. He even shed tears of sorrow for her. If it were anyone else, they might have pitied this miserable man. But I only felt disgust. When our mother died, you didn't cry. When our father passed away, you didn't cry. When the people suffered, you didn't cry. But you cry now over the betrayal of a wicked woman? How pathetic. Even more pathetic was that when Livia was taken away to be imprisoned, he still wore a look of reluctance. As if to say, just submit to me, and I will forgive you. This time, it wasn't just me who thought choosing Julian as emperor was a mistake. Even the Lord Regent and the other ministers shook their heads in disappointment. But I never expected that his madness was far from over. I was placed under house arrest. It was Julian's doing. The Lord Regent and a host of officials pleaded for me, but Julian rejected them all. In his folly, even our father's token was useless. The ministers resented him, but were powerless, as regicide was not something one did on a whim. A single misstep could lead to the execution of one's entire clan and implicate many others. During my confinement, my spies in the palace told me that Julian had sent envoys to Valerius to ask for the antidote. The crown prince of Valerius had only one condition: send him his original intended bride, Princess Aurora, for a marriage alliance. On the day of the wedding, the powerful crown prince of Valerius would give him the antidote. To send me for the marriage, my current husband could not be allowed to live. Ethan and I had been separated for several days. I sent my spies to investigate, but they found nothing. After several days of terror, Julian sent someone with a black hair tie. It was one I had embroidered myself for Ethan. His Majesty has said that as long as you are willing to obediently go to Valerius as the crown princess, His Majesty, in consideration of your merits, will surely release your foolish husband and let him go back to being a beggar. I knew Julian was despicable, but I never thought he could be so shamelessly so. During my confinement, my spies told me that he had moved Livia to the cold palace and posted guards to protect her. He could be so soft-hearted towards someone who had repeatedly harmed him. Yet towards his own sister, he could set new records for shamelessness time and again. The irony was that now, I could only use what little value I had to secure Ethan's safety. When Julian arrived, I was playing chess. One hand holding white pieces, the other black, locked in a fierce battle on the board. He watched for a few moments, then sat down opposite me. "Aurora, do you know what I hate most about you? Is it not that I prevented you from being with the one you love?" He let out a short laugh, unable to stop, as if he had heard something hilarious. As he laughed, his expression suddenly turned cold. "Aurora, you truly don't understand me at all." Chapter 10. My hand holding a chess piece froze. I looked at him coldly. "Julian, what are you trying to say?" "Heth, 2 lifetimes and you still don't get it," he sneered, his eyes filled with hatred. Soon, those eyes, so much like our mother's, turned crimson. They didn't resemble hers at all anymore. "Aurora Sterling, why don't you understand why I hate you?" He shot up from his seat and gripped my chin tightly. "Why do you always act so high and mighty, as if you're bestowing charity upon me, leaving me with no sense of accomplishment even as emperor? I worked so hard, so why was father still disappointed in me? Why, on his deathbed, did he lament in front of me that you were born a girl? Why did he give the token to you? Was he afraid I couldn't rule this country and that you would usurp the throne? Why? Why does no one believe in me? You want to know why I was so infatuated with Livia Thorne? Because she told me I was amazing, that I was no worse than anyone else. She made me feel like she was the only one in the world who understood me. But now, I know that bitch was lying to me. She thought I was incompetent, so she married into Valerius. And for that man who wasn't even worthy of her love, she tried to harm me. Even though I disregarded the entire empire for her, even though I gave so much for her. How could she toy with me like this? Perhaps because he had touched upon his deepest pain, Julian's emotions suddenly collapsed. His eyes were bloodshot, his expression crazed. "You should all die, all of you who look down on me should die." I used all my strength to break his grip. "Julian, today I finally understand the true meaning of an ungrateful wretch." I swept the chessboard clean and stared at him coldly. After mother died, I deliberately showcased my talents to get father's attention. Who was it for? For me? Do you know that in Dongkang, a princess will never die young because she doesn't compete with the princes for the throne? Her only value is in a marriage alliance. But it's not the same for a prince. There are always those vying for power who will arrange for a young prince to have an accidental death to eliminate future trouble. To ensure you could live well, free from manipulation, I worked tirelessly behind the scenes to build your power and win you glory. Yet for this, you envied me, hated me. You even ignored my advice and insisted on getting involved with Livia Thorne just to spite me, didn't you? I almost laughed out of sheer anger. My chest ached with a sharp pain. I never thought this truth would be crueler than his lovesickness. The family member I had protected with all my might had become the person who hated me the most. But now, I could do nothing but submit. Julian, this is the last time I will beg you. I suppressed my anger, knelt on the floor, and bowed my head. I beg the Emperor of Dongkang to be merciful to my husband. After my marriage to the Crown Prince of Valerius, release my husband. Otherwise, I took out the late Emperor's token. I will use all my power to destroy you, ha ha ha. He laughed again, a crazed edge to his voice. Sibling against sibling. Excellent, my status as Princess Aurora was restored. The procession for my marriage to Valerius was befitting a princess, but there was no joy. The entire retinue was somber, like warriors marching to their doom. After all, the Crown Prince of Valerius, Ethan Valerius, had a reputation for being ruthless and not to be trifled with. On the westward journey, I thought no one would see me off. But officials and commoners spontaneously formed a long line, shouting, "Long live the princess," and respectfully bidding me farewell. From the vast crowd, I saw faces I recognized from chance encounters. They were minor officials, diligent street vendors, great scholars with dreams of governing, and refugees working hard to rebuild their homes. Looking at their reluctant gazes, I suddenly had a revelation. Julian envied and hated me because my abilities surpassed his, and he feared every day that I would usurp his throne. But since my rebirth, everything I had done was for revenge. After my revenge, I only wanted to live a peaceful life with Ethan. I had never considered what it would be like if, one day, I took that throne. At this moment, my perspective broadened. Since he's so afraid of me rebelling, why not give it a try? Try to take power in this world as a woman. For myself, and for the countless others who just want to live a good life. The carriage wheels creaked as they turned. As we were about to leave the city, I lifted the curtain and looked back one last time at the magnificent palace behind me. Ethan, wait for me. The journey from Dongkang to Valerius should have taken a month, but Julian, eager to get the antidote, ordered the caravan to travel day and night. I was happy to comply. The sooner I reached Valerius, the sooner I could get the antidote and save Ethan. After 10 days of non-stop travel, we entered the territory of Valerius. I had expected that as a princess sent for a marriage alliance, the best I could hope for was not to be mistreated. I was surprised to receive the warmest hospitality. It was a bit of a shock. According to my spies in Valerius, the crown prince was very ambitious and wanted to conquer Dongkang. And since Julian and I were brother and sister, no one would ever suspect that there was a feud between us. A feud to the death. I thought the crown prince of Valerius wanted this marriage alliance because his spy, Livia Thorne, had failed her mission. He had no choice but to use me as a hostage, hoping Julian would be constrained by family ties, allowing him to gradually gain control of Dongkang. Unfortunately for him, he had miscalculated. After a full meal at the post house, I lay down on the bed. I closed my eyes, my mind racing, trying to figure out a way to break this impasse. The key was the Crown Prince of Valerius. If I could form an alliance with him, I would gain a powerful ally. But this Crown Prince was a wolf, and I was afraid of letting the wolf into the house, of becoming a traitor to Dongkang in my quest for revenge. My mind kept turning, and I gradually grew drowsy. In my sleep, I felt someone hold me. A pair of strong arms wrapped around me familiarly, just like when Ethan held me as we slept. Am I dreaming again? I thought. But it feels so warm, Ethan. Chapter 11. I woke up early the next morning. I instinctively glanced at the other side of the bed. It was perfectly smooth, as if no one had slept there. It really was a dream. I patted my cheeks. I must be going crazy from missing Ethan. After washing up, I went for breakfast. The food prepared at the post house was surprisingly to my taste. After eating, we continued our journey without any rest. A few days later, we finally arrived at the capital of Valerius. Crown Princess, please follow this servant to the palace specially prepared for you by His Highness the Crown Prince. The palace maid assigned to serve me was named Tang Tang. She had a slightly chubby baby face, which I found oddly appealing. Following her lead, I toured my new residence, and I was left utterly shocked. Tang, are you sure this place, with gold for floor tiles, warm jade for a bed, 7-colored glazed glass for walls, and luminous pearls hanging from the rafters, is the palace I'm supposed to live in? Tang nodded with certainty. His Highness the Crown Prince said this is the palace prepared for the Crown Princess. Then she tilted her head and looked at me sincerely. Is there anything the Crown Princess is not satisfied with? You can point it out, and this servant will immediately have it changed. I swallowed. No change is needed. It's just that sleeping in a room like this might cause insomnia. I was afraid of getting robbed, but it wasn't my house being robbed, so it didn't matter. A few days later, on an auspicious day chosen by the Crown Prince of Valerius, we were to be married. I was woken up early for a bath, facial threading, hair styling, and putting on the wedding gown. It wasn't until I was holding one end of a red silk ribbon with the never-before-seen crown prince at the other, bowing to the civil and military officials, that it finally sank in. I was actually getting married again. I wondered if Ethan would forgive me if he knew. He was so simple, so stubborn. Imprisoned as he was he eating well, waiting for me? Ethan, I couldn't help but call his name in my heart. I miss you, I miss you, I miss you, as the announcement for the exchange of bows between husband and wife was made, and the final ritual was about to be completed. I would truly become the crown princess of Valerius. Just then, a familiar voice shouted from the ceremonial hall. Your Highness, the crown prince, wait, Livia Thorne, rescued by who knows who, had arrived at this very moment to disrupt the proceedings. I felt a slight urge to laugh. I wonder what Julian would think if he knew. Would he regret not having her executed immediately? Because of her interruption, the final ritual was paused. Through my red veil, I heard Livia reveal everything about me. Your Highness, this woman is an enemy of the Emperor of Dongkang. Marrying her will not help you control him. Moreover, she is no longer a virgin. She was given by her own brother in Dongkang to be the wife of a foolish and wretched beggar. That beggar is so filthy and insane, she has been thoroughly defiled by him. If you touch her, you will surely be infected with some foul disease. I urge your Highness. Ah, it was Livia's scream. Hearing Livia's denunciation, I knew I was done for. Just as I was trying to think of a countermeasure, the situation took a sudden turn. You are him. How could you be? Livia's voice was filled with disbelief, trembling violently. Then another, exceptionally familiar voice sounded in my ears. But this voice was different from before. It was cold and dignified, filled with the authority of a ruler. Drag her out, do as she requested. At that moment, I suddenly looked up and lifted my veil. I saw the person I had been longing for day and night. Ethan, Chapter 12. The man, who had been radiating a palpable killing intent just a moment ago, froze when he heard me call his name. The murderous aura vanished and his tall frame trembled. Wife, let me explain. The crown prince of Valerius was, for all intents and purposes, the king. With a single sharp glance from him, everyone else withdrew from the great hall. Wife, I really didn't mean to hide it from you. He hung his head, cautiously laying everything bare. It turned out that in their previous life, he had regained his memories. Unfortunately, he remembered too late. By the time he found me, my body was already cold. To avenge me and our unborn child, he returned to Valerius, killed Thuron Valerius, and imprisoned his biased father. From then on, he became a warmonger, vowing to strip Julian of everything he had. Later, he led his army to the city walls of Dongkang and, in front of everyone, listed Julian's atrocities against me, each one more horrifying than the last. Finally, using Livia's blood as a sacrifice, he drove Julian mad, who then tried to take him and the entire capital down with him. At that moment, the city's people, grateful for my past kindness, secretly opened the city gates, allowing him to march in unopposed and capture Julian before the capital could be reduced to ruins. After Julian's death, his vengeance was complete, and he returned to the ruined temple. He wanted to tell me that he had avenged me and our child, but when he fell asleep in that familiar bed, he woke up to find he had been reborn. Reborn at the moment, he had lost his memory and become a beggar. Fearing he would miss me, fearing that things would change, he acted just as he had in his past life, waiting foolishly, until I arrived. Wife, you have no idea how happy I was the moment I saw you. For that moment, he had prayed fervently before the gods, and his prayers were answered with this life. So, how could I let him harm the treasure I had worked so hard to get back? And so, for my sake, he snuck into the Dongkang Imperial Palace in the middle of the night and beat Julian so badly he couldn't get out of bed. For my sake, he played the fool, just to spend a period of simple, happy days with me. And now, for my sake, he had carefully laid his plans, forcing Julian to restore my title and give me the honor I deserved. Step by step, He fulfilled the promises he had made, never thinking of himself. How could he be such a lovesick fool? But the thing is, I was the object of his lovesickness. I couldn't help but smile. Wife, please don't be angry anymore, okay? Who would have thought that the renowned crown prince of Valerius was such a master of coaxing? Seeing a man of his stature nestling in my arms was just too embarrassing. My face burned. I had to push him away and say, with a straight face, "I'll let it go this time. If you hide things from me again, you'll be punished according to family rules." Okay. He grinned, that foolishly happy look returning to his face. Then, he wrapped his arms around me and pulled me into an embrace. "Eyeing, in this life, I will protect you and never let anyone bully you again." Hearing his words warmed my heart. After a tender moment, we summoned the officials back to complete the wedding ceremony. From then on, I was the crown princess of Valerius, the wife of Ethan Valerius. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, Ethan and I were properly married. During my days as the crown princess of Valerius, I came to see the true face of this renowned man. He was serious and meticulous in his work, fair in his rewards and punishments. He never avoided me when he was reviewing state documents and even asked for my opinion. In his free time, he didn't take me to admire flowers or the moon. Instead, he took me to the military training grounds outside the capital to watch the Valerian soldiers drill. "Eyeing, look, I've adopted your training methods." Through practical combat drills and multi-branch training, Valerius has achieved its current military strength. He introduced me to all his troops without any hesitation. Do you know why our Valerian soldiers are different from those of other nations? Because your head instructor is my wife, the crown princess of Valerius. The reason you are strong, the reason you are invincible, is because your crown princess is the greatest talent in the world. A casual word from her is a brilliant strategy, a wise saying that can govern a nation. So you must revere your head instructor as you revere me. I had to admit, his brainwashing campaign quickly swept through all of Valerius. First the military, then the common people, the officials. At the same time, to build up my reputation, he collected all my past achievements in Dongkang and spread them throughout the several nations. And so, I became a living legend. My status in the hearts of the people even surpassed that of Ethan, the crown prince. I was so annoyed that I gave him a few light punches before bed that night. "Ethan Valerius, what's with all this fanfare? Are you trying to get me to usurp the throne and unite the world? And why not?" He chattered on, but his hands were busy with their own agenda. The 4 nations of Dongkang, Valerius, Northmark, and Sutherland were one country hundreds of years ago. It's time they were united again. I slapped his mischievous hand away. For that to happen, someone has to stir up trouble first. He wasn't annoyed by this and simply smiled as he shifted his position. "Don't worry, wife, it will happen soon enough." Chapter 13. That winter, the nation of Northmark launched a major invasion of Dongkang. The defending general on Dongkang's northern border sent several urgent messages requesting reinforcements, all to no avail. The city fell, and the enemy broke through the natural defenses, advancing eastward, burning, killing, and plundering wherever they went. A survivor risked his life to travel to the capital for help, only to be hunted down along the way. He was eventually rescued by an official who was out on business. Only then did the truth become known throughout Dongkang. Julian's despicable act of concealing the Northmark invasion, secretly killing messengers, became known to the world. It was said that when Julian was surrounded by the common people and officials, he had gone mad. "I can't get the antidote, so I'm going to die anyway. Let the entire nation of Dongkang be buried with me. If you want to blame someone, blame Aurora Sterling and her adulterous husband. They are the ones who schemed against me. They want my throne. They are the most despicable people in the world." As soon as he finished speaking, someone spat at him. "You ungrateful beast, Princess Aurora was so good to you, yet you repaid her kindness with cruelty, and now you dare to slander her. Ha, didn't you say you were poisoned? Didn't you say you wouldn't live for more than 3 months? Princess Aurora has been married into Valerius for almost half a year now, and we haven't seen you, you black-hearted dog, drop dead." With the nation's survival at stake, even the common people lost their fear of the emperor. The more they spoke, the angrier they became, until one by one, they spat on him, drenching his dragon robe. And so, Julian began his life of imprisonment. At the same time, the Lord Regent and a host of ministers sent letters to Valerius requesting aid. Just then, a large army emerged within Dongkang's borders, flying a banner with the character, Hua. They marched majestically towards the Northmark invaders. Their tactics were unpredictable and mysterious. Whether on mountains or plains, they had a unique way of achieving victory. Even the Northmark cavalry, a source of great pride for them, lost over half their numbers against this army. In the end, they were soundly defeated and retreated in disgrace, leaving their war horses and weapons for the Dongkang soldiers to gleefully collect for their own use. Of course, besides their tactics, the most surprising thing about these soldiers was that their commanding general was a woman, and over half of the soldiers in the army were women. Although women were generally seen as physically weaker and smaller, this battle showed the world their advantages in warfare. Lacking brute strength, they relied on agility. Their smaller stature was actually an advantage against taller opponents. On the brutal battlefield, they moved like slippery fish, relentlessly reaping the lives of their enemies. Their ferocity made even the men take notice. But no one dared to be jealous of them. These women, once looked down upon by the world, had trained day and night for this day, working harder than any man. All for the day when they would no longer be a bargaining chip in their family's marriage alliances, no longer be a money-losing commodity to be sold off at will by their families, no longer be a source of shame, but a source of glory, deserving of their own page in the family records. In my name, they would bear my surname, be granted equality and given freedom, so that all the persecuted, rightless women of this world, who struggled their entire lives just to survive, would know that being born a woman is not a sin. They, too, could live a brilliant and unrestrained life. Because this battle in Dongkang was so unique and stunning, it attracted the attention of rulers from all nations. The first to arrive were the Lord Regent and the ministers of Dongkang. Only when they saw them in person did they realize that these brave and fierce soldiers were almost all former refugees from the floods and droughts of the south and north. As for the commanding general, it was none other than the princess who had married into Valerius, Princess Aurora, Aurora Sterling. Yes, it was me. The natural disasters in the south and north that year had made me witness a living hell. Wives and daughters were the first to be abandoned, then the elderly, the young children, and finally the able-bodied men of the family. In the face of disaster, a single steamed bun could buy a young girl, a piece of silver could buy a strong man. You see, the lives of the common people were worth so little. Yet they had endured countless hardships to travel 1,000 miles to the capital for help, only to have their last hope shattered by Julian. In my past life, Julian had cut me off from information, and I didn't know the exact timing of the floods and droughts until the rebellion had fully erupted, and I realized the severity of the disaster. So, in this life, I had my businesses stockpile grain. I was finally able to prevent the tragedy of floating corpses that had occurred in my past life. Later, I took in the rebel armies, the homeless, and all the women who wanted to live a better life, and created the Hua family army of today. After learning the truth behind this army, the Lord Regent and the ministers voluntarily knelt and pledged their allegiance. Long live the Empress, long live, long live. The news that Dongkang was now ruled by a woman quickly spread throughout the nations. Everyone assumed that as my husband, Crown Prince Ethan of Valerius would surely feel humiliated. But to everyone's surprise, on the day of my coronation, he sent me a great gift. As I placed the crown symbolizing imperial power on my head, Ethan appeared at the sacrificial ceremony, holding a black crown. Chapter 14. Black was the color of honor in Valerius. As he walked towards me, holding the crown, and considering all his arrangements in the preceding days, I had a faint inkling of his intention. He wanted to push me to an even higher position. And indeed, under the watchful eyes of everyone, he personally placed the crown symbolizing the imperial power of Valerius on my head. "Wife, it's not over yet," he whispered in my ear, but his words thundered in my mind. "There are still 2 more countries, aren't there?" Later, Dongkang and Valerius merged to become the Kangling Empire. I was in charge of political affairs, and he was in charge of the military. Under his leadership, the Kangling army was invincible. First, they defeated Northmark, which had repeatedly invaded their borders, and incorporated it into the empire. Then, They helped Sutherland drive out the foreign barbarians who had coveted their lands for years. In gratitude, Sutherland voluntarily submitted, and so the four nations were united as one. On the day I became the ruler of the four nations, I released Julian. He had been imprisoned for a long time and had gone mad. Aurora, where are you? I'm your brother, why aren't you taking care of me? Aurora, you always protected me, didn't you? Why weren't you there when they bullied me? Come quickly, drive them all away. Aurora, Aurora. I slowly walked up to him, and as he looked at me, our eyes met. Julian, a flicker of clarity returned to his clouded eyes. He grinned like a child, waving his arms and legs. Aurora, have you forgiven me? Are you willing to acknowledge me as your brother again? I know I was wrong. Tell them to let me leave the cold palace, okay? I don't forgive you. I don't acknowledge you. And no. I waved my hand and ordered my men to hold him down on the divine altar, in front of the people of Dongkang who had come to pay their respects. Today, the four nations are united as one. I offer the life of this villain to the heavens, to the earth, and to the innocent souls who died because of him. Executioner, present the blade at my command. The executioner ascended the sacrificial platform and, with a dagger, began to slice the flesh from his body, piece by piece. Under the agony, he finally dropped his act. Aurora Sterling, you're just lucky you married a man willing to support you. Don't forget, I was the one who found that man for you. You should be thanking me. You shouldn't repay my kindness with cruelty. Aurora Sterling, do you think that just because he dotes on you for a while, you can be arrogant for the rest of your life? Just you wait. When he gets tired of you, your throne, your glory, will all be ruthlessly taken away by him. And then you'll be a pathetic, helpless person with nothing. Aurora Sterling, shut up, my husband, so angry that he forgot his status, went up himself and gagged him. You trouble-making piece of filth, how dare you slander my name? Am I the kind of person who would abandon someone after getting what I want? Besides, Aang is so capable. What right do you have to deny her accomplishments? As soon as he said this, the crowd below roared in agreement. I am the chief manager of the Grand Imperial Bank, which spans the four nations. My master is Her Majesty the Empress. I am the chief manager of the Grand Imperial Merchant Guild, which covers all aspects of life. My master is Her Majesty the Empress. I am the first female general of Dongkang. My master is Her Majesty the Empress. I am the state protecting general of Valerius. My master is also Her Majesty the Empress. We are the people of the South and North. It was Her Majesty the Empress who gave us a second life. We are the people of the Northern Grasslands. It was Her Majesty's Merchant Guild and Bank that allowed us to survive the cold winters without resorting to robbery. We are the people of the Southern Forests. It was Her Majesty's troops that protected us from being captured by foreign tribes and enslaved. We are women from all corners of the land. It was Her Majesty the Empress who taught us that, as human beings, we too can protect our country, read and write, work and earn money, and become the pillars of our families, just like men. We willingly and respectfully welcome Her Majesty the Empress to rule the four nations and ascend to the pinnacle of the world. Julian died. Before he died, he finally said to me, I'm sorry. Perhaps he had finally come to his senses, but I felt nothing. I did not bury him in the imperial mausoleum. I was afraid of defiling my father's resting place. His final destination was the mass grave on the outskirts of the capital. There, countless souls who had died by his hand were waiting for him. A few years later, the unified four nations were prosperous, and the people lived in peace and contentment. During one of my inspection tour, a lively and lovely little girl stopped me. Your Majesty, they say the Emperor Consort is madly in love with you. Is it true? By now, through intermarriage, the four nations had truly become one. It was no longer a rare sight for women to hold official positions in the court, nor were women who worked outside pointed at and judged. Just like now, a little girl could have the same confidence and courage as a boy, asking me questions so openly. I smiled. I took Ethan's hand, who was standing beside me. I still habitually called him Ethan. He looked at me dotingly, supporting my slightly fuller waist as I stood up. Yes, I am madly in love with your Empress. I even wanted to bear children for her, but unfortunately, there isn't a single genius doctor in this world who can grant my wish. Seeing that he was about to start his red-eyed rant again, I quickly covered his mouth. Who would have thought this man was so obsessed with having children? He had secretly sought out a bunch of so-called genius doctors to research the matter. When I caught him, he told me with a resentful look that he had been on the verge of success. Success, my foot. He had been scammed by those so-called doctors and was about to become the second most famous fool in history. As for the first, that would naturally be the first emperor of the ancient Huaxia dynasty. To put an end to his dangerous behavior, I quickly got pregnant. But what was truly exasperating was that ever since I became pregnant, this man had become so neurotic. At the slightest change in my body, he would hold me and cry. The result was that throughout my entire pregnancy, I was perfectly fine and even gave birth to a pair of healthy twins, a boy and a girl. He, on the other hand, suffered from morning sickness and prenatal anxiety from the first trimester to delivery, losing a great deal of weight. Now that he was back to normal, I didn't want him to get obsessed with that research again. He was exhausting, honestly. Who can relate? You really have to keep a close eye on a lovesick husband. One moment of inattention, and he starts competing with others. And do you know what they compete about? Who is more of a lovesick fool? Chapter 15. Ethan's story. Before I turned 18, I always believed I was my father's most valued and favorite son. Because the woman my father loved most was my mother, the late Empress of Valerius. After I turned 18, I learned that it was all a scheme orchestrated by my father. He didn't love me. The one he truly loved and wanted to protect was Thuron Valerius, the son of a concubine who was like an invisible person in the palace, never given any importance. How cruel was he to me, just to ensure Thuron would have fewer troubles after ascending the throne? First, he made me lose my mother, the one who truly loved me. My mother's death was ruled an accident, but I later found out that it was my dear father who had poisoned her. For the sake of his beloved, he personally poisoned the wife who had stood by him through thick and thin. Without my mother's presence, he, as a loving father, constantly brainwashed me. Ethan, Thuron is pitiful. He's always looked down upon by the other princes. As his older brother, you must take good care of him. Ethan, Thuron has never received any decent gifts. Let's give this divine steed to him, shall we? Ethan, I was raised with such teachings from my father, and taking care of Thuron became a habit. It wasn't until I was on the battlefield, leading the vanguard against the Northmark forces in that canyon, that I learned the truth. My plan was to launch a surprise attack on the Northmark supply depot at night. As the commander of the vanguard, I naturally led from the front. But when we passed through the canyon, we found that the enemy had already set up an ambush. It was then I knew I had been betrayed. The battle to break out was brutal. My thousands of soldiers gave their lives to create an opening for me. Dressed in a common soldier's armor, I broke through with a few surviving comrades just before dawn, utterly battered. But I couldn't stop, couldn't rest. I had to go back and tell the Valyrian army. There was a traitor in our ranks. But when Thuron pointed his sword at me and revealed the cruel truth, I realized I was so foolish. The father I had always respected was my mother's murderer. The person I had protected like a brother all my life wanted nothing more than to eliminate me. But my revenge was not yet complete. How could I die? So I pushed my martial arts to their absolute limit, escaped his pursuit, and leaped into a raging river. When I opened my eyes again, who was I? Where was I? Oh, they said I was dressed in rags, clearly a beggar. A mad and foolish beggar at that. I ignored them. Anyone who dared to bully me or steal my food, I would beat them. I was strong after all. Later, the beggars whose territory I had taken over were squatting in the distance, muttering, "I hear the capital is the richest place in the world. Being a beggar there, you'd never have to worry about food or drink." Yeah. You could probably eat big chicken drumsticks all the time. I loved chicken drumsticks, so I had them point the way and I headed for the capital. When I arrived, I realized those people had lied to me. But I was so hungry, I didn't have the strength to go back and beat them up. So I could only kneel on the ground and pray to a dilapidated statue of a god. I wished I could eat my fill every day from now on. But the statue was a mindless god, it couldn't even hear me properly. That night, it sent me a woman. But the woman was bound and gagged, and she looked like she was in pain. And the man who brought her was still trying to fool her with his sharp, piercing voice. "Your Highness, just be a good little beggar's wife here. Once His Majesty's anger subsides, he will bring you back to the palace." A beggar's wife, my foot. They didn't even give her a bite to eat. Even a fool could see they were bullying her. I was indignant and used the strength I had just regained to drive those liars away. When I returned, the woman, who had looked so miserable, as if a loved one had died, managed a small smile at me. Thank you. I didn't know what thank you meant. I only knew I was very hungry, so I untied her ropes and held out my hand. My beggar wife, can you give me something to eat? Later, I learned that beggar wife wasn't a name, just like my name wasn't Beggar. But I was puzzled. Whenever people saw me, they would point and say, he's a beggar, a foolish, mad, stinking beggar. You are not foolish, not mad, and not stinking. She gently washed the dirt from my body. Look, you're so handsome when you're clean. She pointed to the sun in the sky, like the brilliantly shining sun. Later, she named me Ethan. Ethan, let's go to the mountains. Whenever she wanted to go to the mountains, I would get very excited because she was going to make my favorite beggar's chicken. I actually wanted to catch all the wild chickens in the mountains, but Aang said we needed to be sustainable. She also taught me how to find food in the mountains, how to set traps, and how to avoid predators. She was so smart. No wonder the statues sent her to me. She really did make sure I was full and well-fed every day. I liked her a lot. Aang, look, I learned a new word. Every time I learned something new, I had to tell Aang immediately, because Aang would give me a reward. At first, it was food. But later, I saw a man in the woods calling a woman wife and asking her to kiss him. After the kiss, he was very happy. He said his wife's lips were as sweet as honey. At that time, I wondered, what did honeyed lips taste like? I had a wife too. Aang said she was my wife. Could I taste them too? So I changed my reward to that. I still remember the first time Aang kissed me. Her cheeks were bright red, like the fiery clouds at sunset. It was so beautiful, but she kissed me too quickly. I didn't get to taste it. I instinctively smacked my lips and only caught a faint fragrance. It smelled quite nice. This made me believe what that man had said. I studied even harder. I was determined that next time, I wouldn't let her get away with it. I wanted to properly taste how sweet my wife's lips were. Later, I learned that Aang's lips weren't sweet, but they were very fragrant. More fragrant than Beggar's chicken. So fragrant that I couldn't help but want to taste them all the time. But Aang was so stingy. Later, I went to watch that man and his wife again. I learned from them. If you are good to your wife, she will be happy and give you kisses. So I decided I had to be even better to Aang. Better tomorrow than today, and better the day after than tomorrow. Then maybe Aang would reward me? Chapter 16. Aang and I lived happily together. We were so happy every day. But whenever that man with the sharp, unpleasant voice came, Aang would become unhappy again. It turned out they wanted to take Aang away. That wasn't going to happen. Aang was the wife the statue had given me. No one was allowed to take her. So I swung my fists and fought with those men. They couldn't beat me, but they had those shiny, sharp things that hurt a lot when they stabbed me. When I was in pain, I didn't have the strength to protect Aang. This made me hate myself. Aang is so good. How can you complain about the pain? So I gritted my teeth and charged, fighting them with all my might. But they were so nasty, they even called for more men to help. I was so sad. I had no strength left. I couldn't protect Aang anymore. What should I do? What should I do? Right, I still have my teeth. I bit their arms, their hands. I just wouldn't let them take Aang away. But in the end, they pinned me to the ground and beat me, and I couldn't resist at all. And then I had to watch as they took my Aang away. Aang, I lay on the ground like a pile of mud, calling her name, but Aang didn't answer me anymore. For the first time, I felt that those people were right. I was a big fool. I was useless. I couldn't protect Aang. Who could I ask for help? Who could give Aang back to me? Right, the statue. Aang was a gift from the statue. I didn't care how much my body hurt, how dizzy I was. I just knelt on the ground and kowtowed over and over. Give Aang back to me, please give Aang back to me. I kowtowed from night until dawn. At dawn, my Aang came back, but she looked so sad. Especially after seeing me, she was even sadder. I wanted to make her happy, but I didn't know how. I could only imitate the way that man comforted his wife, holding her and kissing her. But this method didn't work at all. She cried even harder. Later, my body stopped hurting. She started smiling at me again. One night, she told me she wanted to be my real wife. I was a little confused. Wasn't she already my wife? Why did it matter if it was real or not? But after experiencing that buzzing sensation in my head, I understood. So this was a reward my wife hadn't given me yet. Now that she had given me this reward, she was my real wife. I liked it a lot. I liked eyeing even more. Husband, we're having a baby. One day, after eyeing and I came back from selling our goods from the mountain, she looked at me with a joyful surprise and placed my hand on her belly. I didn't understand what having a baby meant yet, but a strange sensation came from my hand. How to describe it? It was like my heart suddenly felt soft, as if it had been tickled by a kitten. I was a bit at a loss, but eyeing told me that our family was going to have a new member, and I had to love her very much. Hearing that made me feel a little wronged. I only liked a home with eyeing. I didn't like other people. I only wanted to be good to eyeing. To show how good I was to her, I said I would go to the mountains to catch a wild chicken for eyeing to build up her strength. I learned this from that man too. Every time they were in the woods, he would say he was going to build up his wife's strength, and his wife would be very happy. Later, I asked an old lady, and she winked at me and said that building up strength just meant giving your wife more meat to eat. I was good to eyeing. I wanted to be better than anyone else. So, I decided I would build up eyeing's strength every day. But when I came back with the chicken, eyeing was gone. I held the chicken and asked around, and finally, someone told me that eyeing had been taken away by the current emperor. I asked where the emperor was. They said the emperor lived in the imperial palace. I went to the palace gate to look, and I saw a group of people carrying someone out. The person they were carrying was covered in blood. The blood dripped all the way, annoying them. So filthy, now we have to clean the floor. Let's just dump her somewhere later. It's not like His Majesty cares. That's right, they didn't care. They thought she was filthy, but I cared about her. She was my eyeing, my most favorite eyeing, the one who was the best to me. I rushed forward to fight them for eyeing and was beaten again by those guards, but I finally got eyeing back. But it was so strange. Why didn't eyeing open her eyes to look at me? Why was eyeing's body so cold? Why had eyeing bled so much? Eyeing, she must be in so much pain. But she was always so afraid of pain. Don't be afraid, eyeing, I'll take you to a doctor right now. But when I took eyeing to the clinic, the doctor said eyeing had been dead for a long time. Why? Eyeing was so good. Why did she have to die? I didn't believe it. I took eyeing back to the ruined temple, and I kowtowed to the statue over and over. Again and again, I slammed my head on the ground, creating one bloody pit after another. My head hurt so much, I was swaying, but eyeing still didn't wake up. Was it not enough? I continued to kowtow until I passed out. A long time later, I woke up. I remembered everything. I was the crown prince of Valerius. I had a heartless father and a younger brother who coveted my position. This world was full of demons and monsters, except for eyeing, but she was dead, killed by her own brother. And so, there was no one left in this world who loved me. Later, I avenged eyeing, and I avenged myself. I returned to the ruined temple, because eyeing was buried next to the temple. I hugged eyeing's grave, but I couldn't feel any warmth at all. But I missed her so much so, I knelt before the statue once more. Again and again, one prayer after another. A devout wish. First wish, may my wife always be joyful. Second wish, may my wife always be triumphant. Third wish, may we forever be together. End of story.